Welcome to the Sky Sports Cricket Vodcast with me, Mike Atherton. Rob Key's with us as well down in Kent and Nasser in Chelmsford. It's about 5 hours after England's latest mauling at the Gaba, and to add a bit of insult to injury, they've been fined 100% of their match fee for a slow over rate. So it was a desperate day for England. They've gone 1-0 down in the Ashes, and we're going to discuss it all. I'm in Bondi, so I've been watching the cricket, but I want to ask you two boys, first of all, how much of it have you actually seen? And don't kid me, don't tell me you've been staying up all night watching every ball.
I've watched the first session, tried to get through to lunch. The moment the umpires call lunch, I've legged it to bed. I get up early anyway, so getting up is not the problem. It's staying up to lunch. That's been the issue.
So you had it on record to catch up as soon as you get up.
Yeah, get up, catch up in the morning. This morning, I wish I hadn't, to be honest.
Easy?
I've been doing less than that, I have to say. You sort of get to 11 o'clock and the WhatsApps start flying and all that type of stuff, and everyone starts talking about what's going to happen. So I sort of wait for that. I then see who's batting, and if it's Warner or someone, I thought I wouldn't mind watching Warner bat. Maybe not the case with some other players. I saw the start of the England game, obviously watched the first half hour and then switched off and thought, oh no, we're in trouble. And then I had such optimism, I think they're a pundit's nightmare, because I spent all of yesterday saying, oh, we're back in the test. This is so good. We've got a chance. Root's one of the greatest players ever. And then I wake up this morning and we're done. We're out.
I saw the reaction to your Sky Cricket digital piece yesterday, Rob. We're going to win the Ashes.
I didn't say we're going to win the Ashes. I said, because this is the thing, they take little clips of everything we say, and you say like, well, Australia are big favourites. England have a small chance, and they put Key thinks England's got a chance. Like, all right, thanks a lot. It's not an even money bet.
There's only one place to start, when we're talking about this test match. We've got to start at the toss. I mean,
over to you, Keezy.
That is the only place to start. And I wrote in a piece that I thought Root had the ghost of Nas on his shoulders as he was stood there when that coin went up in the air. I mean, a fiendishly difficult decision to make. Pat Cummins described it as 50-50. Do you think if it had been any other game but the first Ashes test match at the Gaba, that Joe would have bowled first?
Actually, you wrote in your piece the ghost of Hussain Mike Atherton on his shoulders. Well, I'm just quite pleased.
Rob would know who Hutton is.
I'm just quite pleased to be put in the same sentence as Len Hutton, to be honest. But yeah, I think there were good cricketing reasons to have a bat first. As we've seen towards the end of the game, it did get uneven. What he thought, obviously, damp pitch, all the rain they'd had, it had to be soft underneath, grooves, indentations. As they harden up, the pitch will get uneven. We saw the Burns delivery yesterday and then the Stokes delivery overnight, where it's bounced from a length. So you can see the cricketing reasons, but he also said today in the press conference he would have done that again, but they needed to get 250 in their first innings. The problem with this England batting lineup, in those conditions on day one, green, dampish pitch, cloudy skies, and the Australian bowling lineup, did we think that they could get 250 batting first? I think most England fans would say, go with your strength, which was your bowling. So I understand why he batted first, but when your strength is your bowling and you've got vulnerabilities with the bat, you should probably go the other way. And history, as you say, previous England captains have gone the other way, and it's jumped up and bit them in the backside, really.
Rob, the psychology of it fascinates me, because obviously Nas made that decision in 2002-03, which is 20 years ago now, but we rib him about it every year. If a captain puts a side in and they get 400, the captain gets absolutely nailed. But if you bat first and get bowled out for 120, it's not the captain who gets the criticism, it's the batsman who get the criticism. So the psychology of it makes it more difficult, I think, given what's happened in the past, for Joe to have put a side in on that first morning.
I think that's absolutely spot on. But I mean, you two would both know. I'll ask you this question. I mean, isn't it the biggest load of nonsense ever? I know Pat Cummins would have won a toss and batted as well. But a lot of the time, you might end up doing the thing that you don't actually want to do. And the thing is, I mean, I admit Nasser gets a lot of stick, quite rightly. But then we batted first, or whether we ended up batting first at Adelaide and got hammered. You know, we then batted first in Perth and got hammered as well.
Rob, can we talk about the present series?
Well, do you know what I mean? Like, I think he did do the wrong thing at the toss. And I didn't agree as well, because afterwards he said, well, no, and people were saying that you had to do that with the side that they picked. I didn't agree with that. He had a balanced team. You know, he had four seamers, albeit, all right, Stokes ended up injured. So I didn't agree with the thought process of why they did it. But I think you're absolutely right. And it's that fear that we all live in now of, you know, the world comes for you if you do things wrong. It must be so hard for players now because people are unforgiving with stuff like that, as Nasser knows. It's what sort of has defined his whole career.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I thought there was certainly enough movement to have bowled first, but the bigger crime was batting badly. That was never 147 all-out pitch. If they'd have scrambled to 250 or 260 and then taken the chances that came their way, the drop catch, the no ball when Warner was bowled, the run out that Hamid could have easily just walked the ball into the stumps, you could envisage a situation where England had maybe not quite parity, but just a small deficit, and then the advantage of batting third and bowling last. So, I mean, they batted badly on that first day, 147.
You know, that's the issue, isn't it? The talk is going to be about the toss, the talk is going to be about the team selection, the talk is going to be about Broad and Anderson, etc., fitness, resting, rotating. The issue, as England know, and England fans know, and we know, for a long time now has been the batting lineup. You know, this year, I think, what's the stats? Joe Root is the only one who averages over 40 this year in Test cricket. I think it is Root and Milan are the only ones who average over 30 this year in Test match cricket. And it's Root and Burns are the only ones with Test match hundreds this year. And those collapses are there. And you know what? They lost 8-0 today in a session. And, you know, you were there. You watched it albeit from Sydney. Was it an 8 in a session pitch today?
Not at all. I mean, the critical thing was the 10 overs. They had 10 overs to the second new ball. The second new ball was always going to be challenging, as you know, here in Australia. When the pitch starts to get into the fourth day, and the Australian bowlers tend to hit the pitch a bit harder than English bowlers. That second new ball was always going to be a challenge. So once they lost 3 wickets before getting there, you feared the worst. But that was the disappointment, really, that Root and Milan had looked so composed, comfortable, classy yesterday, and, you know, barely added anything to their overnight score. We'll come to the batting in a minute. I just want to go back, actually, to the start of the game, because you talked about the selection there and Broad and Anderson. I think I'm in a minority. I've seen a lot of criticism of Joe leaving basically 1,000 Test wickets on the bench. I just feel it was such a huge risk to have played them. When you think of the criticism that came the selectors' way when they played Anderson at Edgbaston in 2019, on the back of no match practice, he bowled 4 overs, pulled his calf, and was not seen again in the series. And the selectors got hammered for picking him. And Broad, who's 35, hasn't played since August, having ripped his calf. These two have not had any match practice at all, not had a chance to get their loads up. I could absolutely understand why they left them out. What did you guys think?
I would have played Broad because of David Warner as much as anything, but I'm not out there, so I don't know where they're at. I know they haven't practiced much, and we don't know exactly because of the preparation as they've done. I just hope, I have no issue with their selection of the bowlers, as long as they've done it on their thought process of who is the best side, what is the best attack to win this Test match. If they're doing it thinking, well, actually, Broad and Anderson are our best 2 bowlers, but we want to save them for the day-night test in Adelaide, which they did in India, which was a complete shambles, because they basically went into India, that day-night test. They planned like a month in advance that Broad, Anderson, all these people are going to play. They went in with 4 seamers in a game where India had their spinners just run through everyone on a Bunsen. So as long as they think that they're not trying to be too clever, and all their thought processes was, do you know what? We don't care what people say. This is what we think is the best attack to win this Test match, and not getting too far ahead of themselves. then I've got no issue with that. It then becomes harder to see, because I think Nas would say this as well. Broad and Anderson are now not going to have any match practice going into the next test match.
What they have had is every day they've been in the nets at the Gaba. For the first time, they've had, a week of good weather. That was the thing that stuffed England. Everybody knew that they didn't have preparation against the States as they would normally have because of COVID and stuff. But they did have those inter-squad games planned against the Lions, and rain just ruined that. So Anderson, I understand, had a slight niggle at the start of the tour, so was behind everybody else. Neither of them had their chances to get their loads up. But what they've had this week, at least, is a chance. They've been in the nets twice a day, pounding in. It's not the same as a match, but at least they're getting their loads up now for the Adelaide game. So, I still can see why. What do you reckon, Ness?
Well, the other interesting thing is that it's so easy to say, yeah, Broad and Anderson should have played. It was so easy telling people who should play. The difficult bit is who shouldn't play then. Everyone says you need a balanced attack in Australia. Root said in the press conference today, I felt I had a balanced attack. So you need those 5 bowlers. You've got Stokes, albeit he then gets injured halfway through the game. You need pace, so you need to play Wood. They've planned for 2 years. I remember being in the middle in New Zealand with Chris Silverwood at Wellington, and him saying, I need pace in Australia. So he was looking at Wood and Archer and Stone, etc. So Wood had to play. You feel you need a spinner in Australia. You speak to people in Queensland, they generally play a spinner there. Okay, Leach had a bad game. You'd think Ollie Robinson is one of our best seamers at the moment. He bowled the best. He was the pick of the bowlers. So then who do you leave out? I personally would have gone one out of Broad and Anderson. I think it was too much of a risk to play both of them. I went one way, then the other on that. I thought maybe Anderson, your greatest ever bowler. Up front, it would seem weird not going in with him with a big game at Brisbane. But then you had Broad against Warner and get Warner early, and you're right into the series. So I went one way or the other, and I agree with Rob. We've been speaking this week on WhatsApp, me and Rob, about the point he just made, in that now that you've rested them, maybe the bowlers that have got overs in their legs and match fitness are the ones to go again in a back-to-back test. They're the ones with fitness now. But your point's a good one. They've been bowling in the nets, Broad and Anderson. Where do you think was Leach? Where do you think? Everyone will now say, in hindsight, leave Leach out, should have left Leach out and just played 5 seamers.
I thought they should play a spinner. I believe 4 seamers is enough. And, unless you get extreme conditions, in our vodcast ahead of the series, we said, there's that kind of 2% chance that you have extreme conditions where it's an absolute green pitch, a forecast for a shortened game. You can't see the spinner playing much of a role, and in that instance, maybe you can go with the extra seamer. But under normal circumstances in Australia, we've all played in Australia. Those hot, long afternoons, pitch getting flat, Kookaburra not doing what a Dukes does, and you need a spinner now. But the issue, of course, if we stay on Leach for a minute, was just the way Australia took him down, and it was brilliant, really. It's one thing, we've all sat in meetings where we say, let's put pressure on the opposition spinner and don't let the seamers, so let him hold them for the seamers. But saying it is one thing and doing it is another. And it was an extended morning session. We had rain on the first day, and the second day there was the lunch break was extended to 2.5 hours, and it was in that final half hour of the morning session that Root threw the ball to Leach, and Warner just needed no invitation. He was down the pitch, slamming him straight for 6, and Labuschagne didn't hang around either. 31 from 3 overs, and straight away you knew that there was this premeditated plan to take Leach down. And England are in a real bind now, aren't they? Australia have got all these left-handers. They feel Leach is the best spinner they've got. How much confidence do they have in Dom Bess, who took wickets in the Lions game just gone, but as we know, struggled a bit in the winter? So that is a real problem, I feel.
I thought Australia were very smart against Leach. You talk about 31 in 3 overs. Before that, the England seamers had bowled really well without much luck. I won't have too much bad said about the way England seamers bowled in this game. Robinson in particular, but Wood, real effort from Wood in hot conditions, half a man down with Stokes being injured. I thought Wokes was pretty good. Those batters, Labuschagne and Warner, had worked out how long and how difficult it was getting 31 from those seamers, and they went, here are some relatively freebie runs. We're going to help ourselves. So I heard you do something from Bondi Beach today with Rob Key's ghost on the beach. Will McPherson, and there was the debate of whether you leave a spinner out because of Stokes's injury, whether you just go back to the old formula, play Stokes as a batter, and then play 4 seamers. In Adelaide, I know there's all this pink ball swing under lights. There's a lot of cricket play that's not under lights, and it's flat, and Adelaide spins. So I like a spinner in Adelaide as well.
Just I'll come to you in a minute, Rob, but they did quite an interesting bit of analysis here on Channel 7, which is the coverage I've been watching, where they contrasted the kind of flight path of Lyon and Leach. Lyon is obviously a brilliant bowler. He took his 400th Test wicket today. He's one of the great spinners that has played the game. But what is noticeable is how he gets a lot more overspin on the ball, and the ball goes up and down. Whereas Leach, who's not played that much, he hasn't played much Test cricket in the summer, maybe is a bit rusty as well, but his trajectory was very, very flat. And Australia managed to get to Leach when they were coming down the pitch. England really struggled to get to Lyon. He's getting the ball to drop, and that was the noticeable difference really between the two.
Well, I saw Joe Root listened to Joe Root say that he felt he gave him a bit of a duff hand because he was too attacking with the field and all of that. And you look at all the analysis
the sixes were going into the stand, mate. It wouldn't have mattered very much.
No, and you look at all the analysis that people are doing and stuff like that, and they talk about the amount of wicket spinners get at Brisbane and everything. Somehow Root just has to find a way with Leach, where it's not about taking wickets. Actually, he has such a role to play, just holding an end up. And even if you don't have to have men in around the bat. You can put sweepers out everywhere, all that type of stuff. If they want to keep banging it over long on, well, good luck to them. And somehow you need to, Root has to be better at captaining Jack Leach and make sure that he gets it right, lets him into a spell. Even Warney would say, your first job as a spinner is to get another over. He would start with not all men round the bat. He wanted to start with men out and then bring them in as like a thing, no, I'm starting to get on top of you here. So he has to get better. It's not about their average and the amounts of wickets they take. It's can you go at under 3 and over, 3.5 and over, and then rest up the seamers. That's your role or your main role, especially in the first innings.
I think we have to be a bit fair to Leach as well. Hasn't played for England for 10 months. They keep leaving him out. They play with a Duke's ball in England that swings around, so they don't need a spinner. He doesn't play much for Somerset, and when they do play, maybe it's not in the best time of year to bowl spin early in the season, end of the season. Recently, I'm talking in this 10-month period that's just gone, he's bowling on a day 2 green top at Brisbane with a first innings score of 147. That is your worst nightmare as a spinner. So I do think, we give the batters a lot of leeway, we give the bowlers a lot, seamers. I think we can give our spinners a little bit more leeway as well.
I agree with that. Let's go back to the first ball of the game. I'm assuming you guys were up and watching. It was an unbelievable start. It's got your mate Harmy off the hook, hasn't it, Keezy? Because nobody's going to be talking about Harmy's ball to second slip anymore.
No, he was in the studio as well, wasn't he, talking about it? And they'd done a whole, in the build-up, I think they showed an underlay or a clip of Harmy's ball. You just think, he gets asked that so often as well. At every dinner I've been to, he's actually probably earned him money, the fact he's able to have a bit of a story about it. He used to sort of tug on the heartstrings first and then realised that wasn't getting him anywhere. So now he just sort of takes the mickey out of himself. But you just sort of thought, I remember the trip we went on that. And I think Varney fumbled one first ball. And I was 12th man until Jones got injured. Then I had to field, which was horrendous. Everyone felt Simon Jones. I had to field all day. I remember I was sort of near Steve Waugh, and I remember I heard him sort of turn to Buchanan and say that might set the tone for the series. And it was like, we didn't lose because of that. But these things sort of happened, didn't they? And Burns just Yeah, he just does that, doesn't he? I don't think it was a plan, but that foot.
There's no way it was a plan. I mean, I heard some of the commentators on Fox and Seven talking about it being a plan. The plan was certainly for Mitchell Starc to bowl full and straight and get it swinging, but he can't have been planned to bowl him leg stump. But Nas, that we know. I mean, I certainly know what it's like, that facing that first ball of an Ashes series. And you probably know what it's like facing the second ball coming out. Facing the first ball of an Ashes series, I think, is the most nerve-wracking thing I ever did. I was a young kid at the Gaba in 1990 when Alan Border put us in on an absolute green top. And it's the most nerve-wracking thing. Your heart is pounding. And the one thing that does then is slightly exaggerate whatever movements that you have, because you're a bit anxious and a bit nervous. And as we know, with Rory Burns, there's a lot of moving parts there anyway. And although he does normally get his front foot across, he got it even further across than he would normally do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. It's the pressure and the repetition under pressure. If you can, your movements under pressure are always exaggerated. So if you have any kind of technical failing, and they'd done their research, Australia, they'd seen Rory Burns early on does get that front foot across. I think Pakistan, Shaheen Shah Afridi got him out with a full straight one early. Sides tried that to him early on. He's got 6 ducks now in Test match cricket, so he's obviously a nervous starter. When you are 6 this year, sorry, yeah. So thanks for throwing him under the bus there, Af. So, any nervous trigger movement is going to be exaggerated. And that was they did a still I saw on Twitter of the moment Starc was releasing the ball, his front foot was way, way across. And that's why he got bowled behind his legs. And even in the second innings, I saw you wrote about it with the review. He thought it was going down and he reviewed it. And actually it was on height. So it shows that he's lost his off stump a little bit. He is going across to the offside. One thing we know about Rory Burns, that he is a street fighter, that when he does get over that initial nerves and movements, that he has done okay for England at the top of the order. I would stick with him, give him the Adelaide Test match. Can't go back to the chopping and changing days. I know they've got Zach Crawley waiting. I saw the Lions were bowled out for 100 in their first innings in the game that's going on at the moment. They've done slightly better in the second innings. So you're always a better player when you're out of the side. So I would stick with him for a while.
His opening partner, Hasib Hamid, actually shaped pretty well. I know only a couple of 20s. It's not, not winning Test matches with a couple of 20s, but it was his first Ashes Test match, his first Test match in Australia. There was a bit of anxiety, wasn't there, about him, the way that he plays. He plays with very low hands generally, and the Gaba obviously being probably along with the Wacker, the pitch that offers a bit more bounce. And I was quietly encouraged, actually, by the way that he played. He looked quite composed. As I say, it's a very nervy time, the first morning of an Ashes Test match. And I was kind of quietly encouraged by the way that Hamid played.
Yeah, he didn't look overawed, did he? I always think, when you're looking at players, you sort of look to see how they deal with the occasion as much as anything else. And he looked pretty assured in the way that he went about it. Those low hands that everyone worried about. But I quite like the fact he goes forward. I think sometimes when you bowl, I know he's not the most positive player, but at least when he looks to come forward, he actually takes a stride towards the ball, which then puts the bowlers under an element of pressure anyway. And it's the same thing. I just think we've got to be so careful, and it's fine with Hamid, but like what Nasser said there about Rory Burns, and that's where we've sort of been. That's what's got us in this position over the last 2 or 3 years. It's like, he does okay. He's a bit of a street fighter because he'll end up, he played 30 odd tests, averaging 30. I'm not saying they should drop him. I agree with Nash. You give him another Test match, but at some point, if you're a 30 odd year old and you're averaging 30, you may as well have a youngster coming in and doing that. So
who would that be?
Well, I don't know. There's a right-hander. What did you use? Zach Crawley. He might come.
Rob, do you think I mentioned that Lions game? Broad and Anderson didn't go and play with it. They opted to bowl in the net. Do you think it would have been better for Zach to go and play in that Lions game and get some middle practice with all the rain, or have nets?
I think for all of them, they should have gone and played in that. And what happened was that the Australia A refused to, they said that has to be a first class game. So I think what England would have liked to have done was sort of bring Broad in for an innings, bring Anderson in for an innings. I saw Alistair Cook saying about, well, you can't have them playing in one game if they're not playing in the test match. We've got to stop worrying about what people think in that England setup. They've got to stop worrying about what pundits say about them and all that type of stuff and do what they think is the right decision. And it's the other thing that I reckon now, I'd like to see who is helping Joe Root. Joe Root's going to get a lot of stick for the toss, for the decisions and all of that. You now have Chris Silverwood, who is that man in charge of everything. And for the last year, I don't think England have made great decisions. I think England have made it hard work for themselves along the way, and they will blame COVID for it and use it as an excuse. But poor old Joe Root has been hindered very rarely has he had the team that he's wanted. Has he had the squad available for selection? A lot of the decisions have been made out of his hands and out of his control. And things like this, Silverwood should have said, no, Jimmy Broady, you're playing in that game. Zach Crawley, you're playing in that game rather than carrying drinks. Dan Lawrence, you're playing in that game. So I'd just like to see better decisions being made right throughout. And it's not about Joe Root. Chris Silver was there to help Joe Root, make his life easier.
It's not just decisions. I think sometimes in the last year, they've almost tried to outsmart themselves, really.
Exactly.
Just look down at the pitch on day one at the Gaba and say, right, take all history out of this, look down. And I've done that. I've been there and done it and try and reinvent the wheel all those years ago at the Gaba. Just sometimes they do, as you mentioned right at the top of this vodcast or whatever it is, you said that they do seem to plan ahead a little bit too much. We'll have you for the day-night test. We'll have you for the day-night test in our Medabad, and we'll do this and we'll do that. There seems to be like a long-term thing. How about just the short term? You're not playing here today. There's a game going on up the road. You're going to go and play in that. Look at this pitch. We need an extra seamer here, or we need one out of Broad and Anderson. I think sometimes they're almost trying to be a bit too smart. Keep your thinking fairly simple.
We were just focusing in on England's batting there. Obviously 147 all out in the first innings. Australia managed to get a significant lead. England's slip catching worries me no end. I know they only put one down. Rory Burns dropped Warner on 48. It was an absolute dolly at second slip. But they've got Malan in there in the slips because obviously Stokes is not able to feel there, I think, on the back of that finger operation that he had in October. And you'll remember Malan when he played in that 2018 series, he dropped a couple of slip catches and doesn't really do it for his county. And Australia's catching in England's first innings was absolutely sensational. Hazelwood, a couple of athletic catches down at fine leg. And suddenly then we had the contrast between England's missed opportunities, Burns, and then Hamid at short leg. And that's an area that worries me a bit because in Australia, as you know, Nas, with the Kookaburra ball, you create fewer chances, don't you, than in England, where you always feel you're in the game, the ball's moving and, you're going to create chances all day. Here, you create fewer and you've got to take them. Well, it's certainly an area of concern for me. I don't know whether it is for you.
But it's been an area of concern for a couple of years. How many times when we've done the coverage, we put that table up of drop chances and England being way down the list, maybe just Bangladesh. And it's more pertinent for England because they've got such high quality seamers in Broad, Anderson, Wood, Robinson, Woke, Stokes, that you're going to find the edge, especially on the bouncier pitches of Australia. You're going to get a lot of your catches caught in the slip cordon. And it's been there for a while. They chop and change, they're set up, and we've done things. Shane Warne's massive on it, on the gap in the slip cordon. They can't quite get their gap right. We had them at the Oval this summer where people were diving for ones that they shouldn't have been diving for. So it's an ongoing concern. But something like that, you can't fix. You can't make a slip fielder. You can just make them better and make sure they are practicing properly. And to be fair to them, every day we see them and we're on the ground, we see them practicing. But we know there are slip fielders that just catch it for fun. I played with one with Mark Ward, Nick Knight. We all played with, just caught the ball for fun. Ben Stokes does that and he can't go in there. So that is not an easily solvable problem apart from just work a bit harder, lads, please.
Australia's batting really focuses in on three players who probably stand out above the rest. You've Warner, Labuschagne and Smith. And Warner kind of got some ugly runs, really. He wasn't quite at his fluent best and gave one or two chances away, but showed all his resilience and character in getting a score. Labuschagne played beautifully, and I think he's going to be a real thorn in England's side throughout this summer. And Smith was interesting. I mean, England have just lost by 9 wickets, having dismissed Smith cheaply, which they haven't been able to do for the last 2 years. But it was interesting to me when Smith first came in that Joe had 5 men on the leg side. He had kind of a short leg and a leg gully and a stopping one out. But they were bowling basically off stump or just in the channel, bowling normally. Whereas the last couple of series, they've got sucked into bowl, shoving it so far wide. It looked to me like they had a change of plan and obviously getting Wood, the quickest bowler, on at Smith early on.
But I think that is absolutely right, don't you? I mean, I remember I didn't do the game. You would have done some of the games in their last Ashes series at home, and they're playing on green seamers. And can you imagine as a batsman? I mean, I was never, ever good enough for people not to bowl that off stump to me. Can you imagine being a batsman and the plan from the opposition is not to bowl at the stumps? So you can't be bowled or LBW. And then we sit there going, oh, I wonder why we can't get Steve Smith out. I go, we haven't bowled a ball at him for 2 hours. Of course you're not going to get him out. So, I mean, I was so pleased to see them do that, because that is absolutely the way. You know, you can set the field accordingly to strong leg side players. You know, stick a man back so it's just one, but give yourself the best chance. That was a positive move, I felt, and I was so pleased they did it as well.
Anything to add, Nass, or you just
No, I was just laughing at Keezy saying I wasn't good enough for them to bowl straight. But I think it comes on the back of that they have been suckered into bowling straight and trying to get. When he first came into Test match cricket, England felt that Steve Smith was an LBW candidate, goes all the way across his stumps. And when you first see him back, you think full and straight, get this bloke LBW. So they tried that. And I remember speaking to Stuart Broad about it. And Broady went, we bowled too straight to Smith. We got to get the ball outside off. So they then went the other extreme of 2 wide. And for most batters, how many meetings have we been in? What batter? Mark Ward, top of off. Steve Ward, top of off. Just go through them. Top of off's generally good.
I think that's right. It's just you're counterintuitive. I think it's top of off or just outside in the channel, but with a strong leg side field, which is where he milks the ball. So you can do that. Bowlers sometimes don't like it when you're telling them one thing and setting a field for another. But I think in Smith's case, that's absolutely right. I have to say, I didn't see anything of Cameron Green. He left the ball and got his off pole knocked back. But I was very taken with his bowling. He looks tall and quick and gets bounce. And he obviously can bat. Well, we've seen him get 250 in a Sheffield Shield game. He looks to me like a serious cricketer that Australia have got on their hands.
Yeah, and ideal with their seamers that he can come in and give them that. I mean, when he can do what he did in the last, second innings, that looks a pretty good attack now, doesn't it? You've got Cummins and Hazelwood, who are world class, the pair of them. Hazelwood's got to be, he was good anyway, but he's got to be the most improved all format bowler in the last 18 months. Cummins, world class, will end up one of their greats. Stark, not only quick, pacey, swings that ball up front, but also, secondly, produces some footmarks for Lyon to land them in as he did today. And then if you can back that up, if you are having a long, hard day, you can't get wickets with an all-rounder like Cameron Green, who's got pace, he's got a bit of attitude about him as well. So that is a seriously good attack. You watched a lot of it. And when Milan got out and people like that, a lot of the talk was, well, he could have left that ball. England could have left better. Go on in, Ath. There's an opening batsman. Because I was always of the opinion, I hated it when coaches turn around and said, leave the ball well today, because you don't want to go in with a negative mindset where you start just thinking, look, all right, okay, you're almost looking to leave before looking to score runs. What's the key, do you think? Because it's all well and good. You could leave a lot of balls that people nick. What's the key mindset to leave the ball well?
I think you're right that you must have the attitude of looking to score, but then in Australia especially, and the Gaba and the Wacker particularly, you must be aware that, you know, you can leave the ball on length early on. If I was to say one thing to the England batters, it would be to get a tape of Labuschagne's first 20 balls. Ollie Robinson bowled beautifully at him. He was right tight into off stump on a good length, and Labuschagne left it fantastically well. The way he constructed his innings, he's got that's his home ground. Before this innings, he had an average of 99.75 at the Gaba in Test cricket. So I think he knows what he's doing. And he left the ball absolutely fantastically, and then allowed, you know, that was the foundation for him to play well after that. So that would be my advice. Watch how he played and try and copy that.
Milan's an interesting one because he could well and should have left that ball on first innings on length. It was waist high, if not above. It would have gone bounced way above the stumps. But he is a very good back foot player. He plays.
If you're hitting the ball,
that's his strength.
If you're attacking the ball, it's fine. What you don't want to be doing early on is defending those balls, but you're not getting any value for your shot anyway, and you're only perhaps, you know, offering some risk. What about we've probably got five minutes. What about the respective captains, Nasser? I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Pat Cummins, fast bowling captain. Very few fast bowling captains down the years. Bob Willis has done it for England. We've had a few all-rounders like Pollock and Akram and Imran Khan, but very few out-and-out fast bowlers. Courtney Walsh, Bobby Willis. Pat Cummins, did you have a say? He had a very easy first half of the game. He had a few more questions to answer in England's second innings when Malan and Root got together. How did you think he fared?
Well, I think he did very well. Better to be a lucky captain than a good captain. Losing that toss, I think, was one of the most important things to do, lose that toss, because as Rob said, he was going to bat fest. Who knows how the result would have gone. They may have won it anyway, but I thought he did very well. His body language was excellent. Bowling, when he bowls, he obviously leans heavily on the experience of Steve Smith. He himself said, when I'm bowling and field settings and bowling changes, I use Steve Smith quite a bit and go and pick his brains. I thought the way he got introduced, all five of his bowlers before lunch on day one, gave Lyon, you know, to see if it did spin a bit off the dampness, and gave Cameron Green, get him in, because he hadn't got, for all, you're right, how good a bowler he is, he hadn't got a test match wicket. So try and get him into his first Ashes series. So he got virtually everything right, and winning by 9 wickets and getting a 5-wicket haul yourself. That is perfect. The only time I thought maybe he could have done something different was after tea, yesterday, when he went to Stark. I expected him to go to Stark, but I thought he would go to Stark in a bouncer, go at Malan and Root. He didn't want another pitch up top of off bowler. Point a different Stark, our quickest bowler, go at Malan and Root. And he just sort of used 3 or 4 overs of Stark. But apart from that, I think he had the perfect game.
It's going to be a good battle, isn't it, Rob, between the two? It was noticeable that the moment Root came to the crease, both innings actually, Cummins brought himself on straight away. Even though I think Hazelwood had bowled a couple of overs, Root was in, Cummins brought himself straight away. I think he sees it as a match-up to kind of win and put one over on his opposite number. But Root played beautifully in that second innings and was playing very much as he had done in the English summer.
Joe Root, I thought he did. The cover drives that he was hitting, he looked as fluent as he ever has done. He's had real problems as well, as you just said, with those 2 bowlers in particular. And that sort of type of bowler that bowls it on a good length, hard, at good pace, and just gets a little bit of movement. He's had to sort of really try and just adapt his technique to playing them. But Cummins is right to go at him, because that is absolutely the whole Ashes in a nutshell, as we keep saying. I mean, if you look back, Nasser said earlier about the runs that Root has scored, most runs for any England Test cricketer in a calendar year, I think. And if you actually look back in that last year, no one else got a 50 in Sri Lanka. England won that series. So Root has scores half the runs. They might lose that. They lose to India. They lose to New Zealand. They lose to India in England as well. And that's with Root getting more runs than any other English batsman in a calendar year. So Australia, I mean, they will just think, if we get Root out, that's the Ashes, we've got it. And so much rests on his shoulders. That's why he's so phenomenal. Even someone like Ponting, he got his runs in a very, very good team, as great as he was. Root has done it as basically the only one doing it. I mean, that just makes that year even more extraordinary.
That's the bit digital going to take, Rob. Root is better than Ponting. Ponting just got one on a good side.
Well, he did play beautifully, but obviously he's 1-0 down now, and I imagine he's got a couple of difficult days ahead. You mentioned there, Rob, that the Australian media are not shy on jumping on an England captain after a defeat like that, when you've batted first and got rolled over and left your 2 champion bowlers out. So he's going to have to show that tough streak and that resilience that all England captains have had to show down under this. Probably one good thing, though, he knows he's not going to lose the Ashes in 11 days, as Nasser. You can't go that badly as we look ahead to Adelaide. We're going to speak, are we, just before the Adelaide Test and preview that game, I hope?
We are, yeah.
Yeah, we are, yeah. Can't
wait.
Sign off
now.
You're in Bondi and Adelaide, and me and Rob are in Canterbury and Chelmsford. We can't wait to hear all your stories of Bondi and Adelaide.
Let's listen to a sign-off. Come then, how you doing?
I've got a sign-off. I'm not in your league at presenting, Rob, so we'll speak in a couple of days. See you later.
Brilliant.
Well done.